Tallboys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear. Miracle Works Detailing. No cars too dirty. And by Cycle Mart, your motorcycle parts store. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thanks so much for tuning in to a very special episode 58 of Tallboys
and Trackmasters
with Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks for coming in, brother.
Be glad to. It's fun. We're going to have a blast here.
I know we are.
I've been waiting to nerd out about weird old tech for quite a few episodes now.
I want to preface this episode by shouting out Motocross Action.
Yes.
Their specific articles of Forgotten Tech went a long way to helping us put together this episode. So I want to cite our sources in a way and thank them for the work that they did in their articles. Make sure you check those out.
Yep, agreed.
Let's get started with how our weekend was, because Trevor, I think you got a little bit of a story to share here.
Let me tell you, you don't get the nickname Aquaman just by staying dry all the time. So.
You can't escape it.
Yeah, my fiance Shiloh and I went camping down in Lower Glady. We checked the forecast pretty religiously, and no expectation of torrential rain or anything. One of the worst storms I've been outside in, and the water rose probably about 2 to 2.5 feet in the span of maybe 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that's the first time in our 8 years together that we have had to pack up and bail out. And that water I was standing in was the walkway back to where my truck was, and everything we had to get walked across that. So I was very thankful to have my Crocs with me.
Oh, so, well, luckily there wasn't any real Crocs.
Pretty exciting. Unfortunately, I didn't get back till probably about 4 o'clock to Fairmont. We left around, started packing up about 1. And that's why I didn't go with you guys to do the wild loop and all that stuff. So, which was its own adventure.
Yes, it was. Yeah, we, those of you who didn't get to see, it took us 7.5 hours to go 42 miles. We had every issue and problem you could ever imagine. And it was one of those rides that sucked during the ride, but the next day you're like, hey man, that was kind of cool. It's kind of adventurous. Got lots of good stories.
The stuff that goes off the rail makes for good memories.
Yeah. Tom, you got to lead the mile guys there.
So. Yeah, we started out really well. We did a lot of back road traveling all the way back to Mannington, and we stopped at my house. I show everybody where I live. So when I go for a ride on a weekend, leaving from my house, everybody will know where to come to if they want to go.
Yeah.
So we left there and we got all the way to the other side of Wadestown and had one breakdown. Took 4 people to get that person out. We lost 5 there. Started with 13. Lost 5 there. And we got about halfway to Cameron, and a couple other guys had enough. They just said, "Oh, we're going home. We know where we're at. We're going home." And we got to Cameron, and a couple other guys said, "Hey, you got Route 250 over there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "We're going home." Okay, so we ended up. Me and another guy came back.
Yeah,
So
that happens.
That was the ride.
That ride was nothing but attrition, no matter what loop you were doing. So
It's borderline mutiny.
yeah, you'll have that. All right. Well, we got a really exciting episode lined up this evening. Excited to talk about. I know me and you have mentioned it, sent a lot of these articles back and forth to each other, and excited to have Tom on the show with us tonight to kind of talk about these from a mechanical aspect of things that you may have seen or may not have seen before. Let's start the list out strong, and we actually have one company that had 2 items on this list, and that was Honda.
Yep.
So this first thing is a lesson in a rule change in a professional racing aspect, kind of being the driving force of creating something.
Sure.
And you see that a lot whenever basically a rule comes down from a governing body and a manufacturer goes out of their way to try to bend and tweak the rule as much as they possibly can to their benefit. And you see a lot of innovation whenever that happens, I think. So this first one is just absolutely wild, and we will pull this up here. Guys, have you ever seen oval pistons before? Let's take a look at this. So, like I was saying before, this is Honda's attempt at circumnavigating a 1968 MotoGP rule change that basically forced all open class participants to limit themselves to 500 cc's and 4 cylinders. And Honda's thought behind this was, well, if we put this together the right way, we can basically have a 32 valve 4-stroke V8 that's still legal for the 4-cylinder 500 cc class. And as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to seal an oval.
You start thinking about the growth rate of the rings and everything as they get up to temp. Start getting away from a nice concentric bore and start eking into oval territory. I know there was one weird chainsaw company that tried like a rounded off square piston for some odd reason at one point. Kind of the same deal. It's difficult to get it to seal reliably.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering what the machine looked like that honed the cylinder that went down over the oval piston.
Yeah.
I would like to see that.
Yeah. And obviously, it was very short-lived. I think they had one bike finish one race in 1981. It was Honda's attempt to show that 4 strokes were capable of competing against the 2 strokes at the time.
Which was kind of Honda's shtick there before they got into the 2-stroke market, was trying to prove that their 4-stroke bikes were a match.
Yeah. Obviously, this thing had a multitude of problems of, piston rings failing, seizing, head gaskets blowing. I think the first race was in 1979, and their lead rider, I can't remember the guy's name. He made it around like 2 turns, and the thing started puking oil out everywhere, and it got onto the rear tire, and he crashed immediately. So, not a good start for Honda in that situation.
What I've read on those was that around 10,000 RPM sustained, the rods would twist and break.
Yeah, because
and then scatter the motor. I don't know if you ever seen a motor scattered at 10,000 RPM, but there's not much left in it.
About like a hand grenade.
Yeah, just a couple bolts.
Start thinking about the forces imparted now that you've got 2 con rods on one single cylinder. It's no wonder that didn't quite catch on.
Yeah, it kind of forced them. Well, the funny thing is too, they come up with this to try to not have to produce a 2-stroke motorcycle to be competitive. That forced their hand, because that was like 2 years later they came out with the 2-stroke 500 cc 4-cylinder. So
what can you do?
Yeah. it's kind of neat to see that kind of growth and attempt at stuff, especially trying to gain an advantage on a rule change, but didn't work out very well for us.
I did like the 8 valves per cylinder. That was cool.
Yeah. 32 valves total on that thing. So imagine doing the valve checks, clearances on that.
No, somebody else's
That's
job.
that's a job. That's a job for my mechanic.
Yeah. Pretty cool stuff.
What
man.
is Yamaha's got 3 intakes and 2 exhausts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
That's what I
five
Yeah.
valve. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a nightmare in itself. I can't imagine trying to do 32
Yeah,
of
I've
them
seen
together.
heard a lot of people buy all new intake valves, and they go home and they put the intake valves in, and nothing works.
Yeah.
Because the center intake valve is just about a half a millimeter longer than the other two.
Yeah.
So you got to pay attention.
Yep. Got to pay attention. Well, Honda's not done with the weird and peculiar items on this
Yeah,
list.
we're getting into one of my favorite I guess concept or test bikes that was ever produced.
Yeah. An EPA compliant two-stroke.
The Honda EXP2.
That thing is very cool looking. Check this out.
So what they were going for was trying to make an EPA compliant two-stroke. This was kind of Honda's last breath of their two-stroke development. I think this was originally produced as a rally bike.
Mm-hmm.
The entire intent was they were going to use a concept called radical combustion, where you weren't necessarily using the spark plug to ignite a fresh charge. You were using part of the charge that had been burnt that was you had it stick around in the cylinder to ignite the next charge.
Right.
So you had effectively trillions of ignition points. So your flame front's not limited to, starting the spark plug and going from there. Your heat transfer to your combustion chamber is greatly reduced. It's supposed to increase efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. This was the first fuel injected two-stroke bike ever produced.
Yep.
It's a pretty complicated system. Of course, ultimately, it didn't stick around. It did work.
Yeah.
I believe that they used some, fancy exhaust valve magic.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure if it was mechanically actuated or electronically
It was actually it was electronically from what I read.
So it may have been the first electronic power valve two-stroke as well.
Yeah.
But it worked for the intent and the purpose, but ultimately the project was scrapped. Due to complexity, costs, etc.
Too expensive, too complex.
I'd really like to see what's underneath all that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
The computers at the time, obviously couldn't process things fast enough to make it completely reliable. I know one thing that I read that was interesting, like you were talking about, it didn't use the spark plug till like 4,000 RPM.
Yep.
It kicked in finally. So it was like
used-
pre-detonation
Yep.
as a bad thing
Yep.
on two-stroke, but it was utilizing that to try to burn all the hydrocarbons.
Yep. So the principle they're using, radical combustion, is something that some two-strokes will actually do. People mistakenly refer to it as dieseling. It's not actually dieseling. It's just the unburned charge meeting the press charge and igniting it, and it's just kind of a self-sustaining thing until you cut fuel or block the air off. But like I said, this one of my favorite little pieces of motocross. They're not motocross, but I guess motorcycle development in general was, they were giving it one last shot to make it EPA compliant, and just another example of a governing body making a rule change that spurred development,
innovation. I know from my research that I did on it, it was actually fairly successful in the racing that they put it through. It won the open class in the 1995 Baja. I think it got 6th overall in the motorcycles out of that, won its class. Won its class again in the early stages of the NORA Nevada series.
which is, those are pretty challenging races.
Yeah, you got to think it's wide open desert, full tilt. It was 400 cc. I think they said it made roughly almost 50 horsepower somewhere in there. So,
and mind you, this is a bike that's a step between like a test mule and a production bike.
Right.
Like it's not a fully fleshed, fully finalized design. So, I would have given almost anything to have had the chance to been on the team that developed that at that point in time. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool to see, that thought process and that try of innovation to save the two-stroke. And you kind of see that coming back a little bit with the new fuel injected stuff we have out now with KTM's TBI and TPI stuff, which, let's be honest, it's not really the most reliable thing either. But
some of it's so good the guys are retrofitting carburetors onto them. So
something I got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Something I think's pretty interesting about Honda is, they started out serving kind of the scooter market. They had the C50, C90, et cetera, et cetera. They really didn't care for two strokes. The owner of Honda at the time viewed them as being loud, obnoxious, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then they came out with the, Elsinore and kind of progressed through the years. So it's interesting, Honda of all companies having their so much research and development money put towards trying to maintain having a viable two-stroke for EPA regulations and everything.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. All right, let's go to the next one, which is something that's actually still used a bit today. And it's something that I've seen people have on their bikes, even here locally, that I've thought about giving a shot, especially for what we do, where you find yourself needing two ends of a fork spectrum.
Yeah.
Where you want a nice, cushy, compliant, soft, ride on some pretty gnarly stuff that we do, but you get into some high speed, really rough stuff. You want that.
You want it to work.
You want it to work a little bit more.
Yeah, you don't want to be blown through the stroke on everything.
I wonder how that would work on my DR.
Well, there's always a chance to figure it out. They still make them.
I'm going to do a little research on that.
We're talking about
going to try it.
fork sub-tanks. So basically what these do is they allow a additional section of air to be over top of the oil in your forks. And when your air gap is high in a traditional upside down fork, your ride is a lot more soft in the initial stroke. It feels a lot more plush, which is great for some really technical trail riding stuff. Because it has to compress
and displace that amount of air before it can start doing work on the oil.
But these are adjustable to the point where you can also crank it back up to be pretty stiff and the compression stroke be very firm into like we were saying, rock sections or something like that. So this gives you a little bit more adjustability on forks. It's kind of a hit or miss. I think with the invention of closed cartridge forks, this kind of went away because you have a high speed, low speed, and you have a lot more adjustability in the forks. These came about when you had open chamber stuff that you didn't really have a whole lot of adjustment on without spending lots and lots of money on it.
And I remember seeing some companies that produce handlebars, maybe ProTape or Renthal, that actually utilize a really small fork sub tank as a section of the handlebars for motocross.
I've got a picture of that here. So you can see here where the initial charge line hooks to the bleeders of the forks, and that's kind of acts as a metering valve to let so much air through or oil back. So here is a picture. These are TGT handlebars. They were eventually sold to Moose Racing, who made these for a while. But
not Pro Cockin.
No, they're not Pro Cockin eBays. But this lets the adjustment knob be right up where you're at, so it's easy to fiddle with and try to fine tune as best you can. And that the air chamber in that setup was actually in the handlebars, so it's utilizing dead space, really not taking up any more weight. But you run into the problem of now you're creating more opportunities for leaks in your system. And I think that was a big issue with these when they first came out. So it's something that I'd be willing to try and see how well they work, especially with my 2015 KTM with the open chamber WP stuff that's a little stiff anyway.
I can't relate.
Mr. Fancy
I'm
Pants.
curious how they work on my
Something.
DR.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just there's no adjustment on those. I mean, it is what it is.
Is it like I know on like my mom's KLR, it actually has like a place on the forks to put air in. So some of those old conventional style forks had kind of an air chamber to begin with anyway, right?
Yeah, no, mine don't. It's a solid chrome cap on top of the fork.
Something that
I'm not against drilling a hole in it.
Yeah.
Something I've seen semi recently is a thing called counter shocks. It is kind of just like an inertia weight or something they'll put behind the number plate. It's supposed to counteract the momentum of your fork stanchions, coming through the stroke. I don't know if they're snake oil. I've never tried one, but some guys that have opinions I respect, like on YouTube, have tried them and had good things to say about it. But it's literally just a kind of a free floating weight in a tube that you strap onto your forks.
Gotta love the strap-ons, right? Yeah, this is something that I really don't think it'd be snake oil, and like I said, I would give it a shot.
I
Try it.
understand the principle behind both those sub tanks and counter shocks. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense to me.
Yeah, mechanical advantage over I think it's Boyle's law about pressure and volume.
It is.
Yeah, it's trying to solve that issue. So, all right, let's move on to next on the list, and that is cantilever or leading link suspension. Let's take a look here. This is old school stuff that we're about to throw down here. So you can see this here. The cantilever setup kind of does away with the rigid swing arm and the need for a full shock. So,
Yep.
Trevor, why don't you explain this a little bit?
In this application, the way that it's set up with your pivot points and everything, it's trying to take a shorter shock and get a longer throw out of it.
Yeah.
You'll see like high-speed desert guys, rock crawler guys use shorter shocks with a cantilever setup, get it tucked up under something. And downside is your effective spring rate's greatly reduced because you got more of a fulcrum acting on it and everything, a moment arm. But for front ends, you see a lot of leading links, especially in like old like Greaves bikes and stuff like that, because the early forks sucked. I mean,
I think Tom can attest.
There's
to
not
that.
really two ways about it. The early forks sucked. You had fork legs that were an inch in diameter that would almost bend into a horseshoe before they'd even start to move through the stroke. So that was an attempt to
hit something really hard, like I did one time. I literally blew both fork seals out of the cap and got a face full of fork oil.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, they weren't that great.
The another thing was, believe it or not, some of these leading link setups are lighter than a traditional, I guess, conventional fork at the time. You could also get more travel out of it. Kind of something handling characteristic wise is that lever arm moves through its range of motion. Your wheelbase is actually lengthening as you're
moves
moving
on a
through the
radius.
stroke. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, when I was down at Fort Hood, they had the Texas 2-day qualifier down there for the ISDE. And I was 17, 18 years old at the time. I didn't know what that was. But I was walking through the pits, or actually I was riding through the pits, and I seen one of these bikes, and it was a CZ that had the forks on it like that, front end on it. And I stopped, and I looked at it, and the guy comes over, he goes, "What are you looking at?" I said, "I've never seen a front end like that before." He goes, "You want to ride it?" Really? Yeah, just take it across the field back. So I jumped on through across the field, and that was the weirdest. I mean, I could see where it takes somebody a long time to get used to that. Because if you went into a downhill turn where the front end was going to compress a little bit, the wheelbase changed.
Yep. Oh, that would be funky. Yeah.
It was weird. Yeah. But it did ride pretty nice though. I was impressed with it.
Yeah, that's something that I heard doing some research, or read doing some research on leading link forks. Is it's a completely different handling style than a conventionally forked bike.
I got to think too, if you have that on the rear setup, that's got to be hard on the chain and sprockets too, kind of changing your wheelbase all the time.
Yeah. So, well, let's go back to the BMW 450. Right. So their solution to that was that the counter shaft for the front sprocket was
part of the swing arm bolt.
The same axis as the swing arm bolt. So there's been a couple other
ATK did that.
Yes, there's been a couple other companies that attempted something similar. But as far as having a long travel, especially a shorter swing arm in the rear, your chain's either too tight or too loose, depending on where you're at. It's either too tight at the top or it's coming off at the bottom of the stroke.
I could see maybe like a shaft drive bike where you have a little bit of a slip yoke or something could probably solve that.
I know. I sent you a picture of that one concept bike. I can't remember the guy's name. It had it's probably the craziest concept bike I've ever seen.
You
Trailing
ready?
link front. Yeah.
I got a picture
Throw
of it here.
that
Let's
thing
pull
up
this
on
thing
there.
up because
This
this
is my
insane.
single
This is
favorite
weird.
crazy looking concept bike.
I don't remember this guy's name either, but he was an engineer for CZ.
Yeah.
And
So he's second with the ball.
yeah, he's a Czech.
Or,
Yeah, he's a Czech.
So it turns out that the Czechs' bike designs as weird as their firearm design. So this thing has an engine that's flipped around backwards.
Yep.
The cylinder head is at the bottom, towards the rear.
Yeah.
It has an expansion chamber that comes up, pretty close to the head tube. It doesn't have leading link front forks, has trailing links. So as your suspension goes through its travel, the wheelbase is actually shortening on this one instead of lengthening.
Look at the chain angles.
Exactly. So I was going to say they used a jack shaft
Yeah.
for the rear swing arm to try to mitigate the.
50 feet of drive chain on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like one of those old Rokon trail
Oh,
breakers.
yeah.
It's got all
we,
the.
we got those later in the show too.
Yeah, we got a picture of those.
Yeah, I mean, that almost looks like a definition of just because you should you. Like,
Yeah.
it just looks like something almost like those big old, the huge unicycle or the bicycles that you've seen in the 20s with the giant front wheel.
Yeah.
Like, that looks
So,
like something you could ride.
This guy's name was I'm going to butcher this because I'm not Czech. František Krnovic.
Yeah.
The Czech motorcycle.
That sounds like
designer.
somebody that would make up something
Close
like that.
enough.
But he's, if you look him up, I mean, everything he's got is absolute insanity. He even had a concept as opposed to having twin shock rear, it was a single-sided swing arm with both shocks on one side to make room for all the rest of the craziness he had going on.
What's that Yamaha street bike that has a weird setup? Is it Yamaha Nikon, I think it's called, in the front? Where it has two front wheels
Two
and
front wheels.
yeah, a single shock on each side. That's a weird looking bike as well.
Yeah, on the Morgantown Honda had one of them. I remember when I worked there, and I remember looking at, what in the world? Who put this together? Somebody messed this all up.
I can't believe that bike made it to production.
Yeah, it's so odd.
Because people think it self balances or something like that. Like a trike, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It still handles largely like a normal motorcycle.
What?
They advertised the heck out of it for a while.
Yeah,
I
I don't think it sold very well.
I couldn't afford two Shinko 216 MXs to run on the front of that thing, so I couldn't be a customer.
Yeah, one of the instances I can think of that where they still kind of use this in a way is the big BMW like RS 1250 or the GS 1250 bikes. They kind of have a cantilever shock setup in between. It looks like a rear shock in the front with actual still force.
Yeah, BMW's got that tail lever link front end, and that's a really interesting piece of tech.
I know that because our buddy Dave Porter that comes and rides with us on that big bike, his BMW is set up like that. He actually blew that shock out coming down Sand Springs Road there. I think it was last year. So I was looking in there he's like, oh man, I blew my front shock out. I'm like,
you did what now?
You what? And I looked in there. I was like, oh, there is a shock back in there. Look at that.
As long as you're not blowing a tranny out on the trail.
Yeah, don't do that.
A friend of mine had one of the BMWs, and I was looking at his front end, and he goes, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't know. Can I take it apart and see how it works?" No.
In classic BMW fashion, we quadrupled the wear points.
Yeah.
Leading link front forks are still used in modern applications for like sidecar racing rigs, like pretty much all the crazy motocross sidecar bikes, stuff like that you see.
That is insane. I would love to go watch that.
I'll go watch mine. No part of it.
You wouldn't want to hang on the side of it?
No. What do they call that guy? The monkey?
The monkey, yeah.
That'd be a really good spot for Arthur.
I think it'd be great for him.
Yeah. He'd have to gain some weight so he could be a little bit more effective.
Oh yeah, you'd be rolling every time.
Yeah.
Trying to go. Why do we always got to make fun of AJ? I feel bad for him.
We ain't here.
Yeah, if you guys haven't ever seen that, look that up. Sidecar motocross. There's a whole series. I know it's really popular over in like Britain, Australia,
stuff like that.
You know, the crazy guys over there. But yeah, seeing a guy hang off the side of a YZ450 trying to give you traction, like that's crazy. Yep, insane. All right, let's move on to our next weird tech, and this is the next to last one we have. This is something that's been around for a long time. It's kind of a niche market. It's kind of a fad in a way, and that is two-wheel drive motorcycles. Been around for a long time.
They've been in pretty much every configuration that you could imagine. Somebody's attempted one from hydraulic to shaft drive to chain drive.
I'd really like to ride
Let's
I would
let's
too.
let's look at the first iterations of this. And I apologize, I didn't get to get the one picture, but this is the world famous Ural. It's the sidecar, 2-wheel drive or 3-wheel drive, depending on what flavor you want to get into there. Been around for military applications for years overseas. Um, has a cult following, just about like anything else. Really cool, do-it-all motorcycle in a way.
Yeah, they had there was a lever there on the back of the seat between the
Yep.
seat and the sidecar. You just pull this lever over, you slid this yoke down, and it
Huh.
engaged the outside wheel.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. And one that's super popular here in the United States is the infamous Rokon.
Everybody wants one of those.
Oh,
So
yeah.
my small engine shop teacher in high school had one of those things stuffed away in the back corner, and I was always curious about it. And I finally asked him. He was explaining everything to me. It was the model that had no suspension. It was all just welded solid and
Yeah.
whatnot. He was walking me through how it worked and everything. And of course, I had a pretty good understanding of it even then. And I was like, "Man, I'd really like to have one." He said, "No, you wouldn't." And it had the old Kohler
Yeah.
single cylinder on it.
Yeah, was it 9 horsepower? I think
Something,
that's what it was.
something like that. So,
So-
pretty interesting concept. The way that it. So the problem with a two-wheel drive motorcycle is when you're negotiating a turn, your front and rear wheels can't actually go at the same speed.
Right.
So the way that the Rokon, took care of that was there was actually like kind of a little slip clutch, but it worked by having a wound spring on a shaft. You go one way, it tightens up and grips, but you slip the other way, it'll loosen up a
So
little
when
bit.
you come out of the turn, it unwinds.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
So I thought that was a really elegant solution to that problem.
Yeah, it's us coming from the Jeep world, it's about the same as welding up the rear end or having a full-time locker in the
Yep.
back. You're trying to make that turn. One wheel's got to spin a little bit faster than the other one, so
Yep.
it's going to scrub and give some weird handling characteristics.
Oh,
It's bad enough in a vehicle. It's really bad on a motorcycle.
Yep.
I got a good story
Go
about
ahead.
welding rear ends up.
All right, let's
when
hear it.
we was kids, one of the guys I hung around with was building a T-bucket
Yeah.
out in his dad's garage. And he was out in the parking lot doing, one wheel peels. That's all I could get. So he thought he was going to weld spider gears together.
Yeah.
Weld it all up solid. Well, he did all that, and he got it fired up, and he had it pointing toward the garage door. He revved it up. Out the garage door he went, and straight across the highway into the bank on the other side because he couldn't steer it away from the highway. Just a good thing when the cars come. It'd have been a hell of a wreck.
Oh gosh, I've done that a time or two. Done the old Lincoln locker in the back of several.
Hey
Cherokees.
man, the Miller-Matic works
yeah.
every time.
Yep. Snapple and Snafu.
Yep. It's great until you have to try to negotiate a turn, man. I used to do a good bit of Jeeping when I was in college, and one of my buddies had a lunchbox locker up front and a welded rear diff.
Oh, it's a great
And
combo.
you've been in the parking garage at Fairmont State.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you could be a mile away, and you would know when he came back for class because the tires were chirping.
Oh man, the best. I know. I used to be pretty heavy in the off-road stuff, and I forget what happened, but a friend of mine had I think it was a Grand Cherokee that he welded the front and rear end up on.
Oh my goodness!
And it had the MP242 transfer case with the full-time mode. Somehow he left it in full-time and was going through a parking garage like that and just grenaded the transfer case right in the middle. It was
surely
fantastic, spectacular crash.
They call that a wrap up.
That was a wrap-up. Yeah. So getting back to two-wheel drive bikes, you have the Ural, you have the Rokon. I'm kind of kicking myself. I didn't get a picture of the one that you sent me earlier. It was a YZ490.
So that was a YZ490, and it actually had leading link front forks that they had created a series of jack shafts to use a chain to transmit power from somewhere up near the head tube all the way down to the front wheel. And there's a video on YouTube of somebody ripping that thing around a rock quarry somewhat recently. So as far as concept bikes go, I thought that was a really interesting idea.
I got it pulled up here real quick.
Please.
I'll show you guys really quick. scroll down here. I don't want to take a survey. Next vital. Thank you. Oh, I don't think they're gonna let me do it.
My goodness, if you're old enough to remember pre-pop-ups internet,
Yeah.
it was too good.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yep.
You can see it's got the disc brake up on the side of the fork there. Really interesting.
What's an E-Buster?
Yeah. It had a chain drive down here on the hub. Series of jack shafts and a leading link that goes up there. The video that you sent me, I got to watch there actually. The guy was saying, absolutely don't put any chain lube on the front of this thing or you will be covered in it.
Yep, you'll be swimming in it. Yep.
Pretty interesting.
So, of course, everybody knows Christini.
Yeah.
Anybody that's ever heard of a two-wheel drive motorcycle knows about Christini. It just never really caught on.
Yeah, so Christini, it's interesting. They first started out offering conversion kits for 450 Hondas to do. And it was one of those deals where you stripped your frame down, you sent them your frame for a basically like a core exchange program, and they would send you one back that was already set up with that chain drive and everything. You can see here, right where the front sprocket is, there's a chain that goes up to another sprocket, and there is a little gearbox on the top of that.
Yeah, it's got a set of bevel gears.
It's got a set of bevel gears in it, and it turns a cable that goes up to the forks, and the cables run down and turn the hub on the front.
It turns two of
Turns two of them on each side of the forks.
in opposing directions. Because anybody that's ever ridden a shaft drive bike knows that rotational inertia
it wants to pull you one way.
Exactly. So that's how they mitigated that.
The cool thing about this is it's biased at full power to be 70% to the rear and 30% to the front, but you can actually turn it completely off and ride it as a normal motorcycle. Here is the two-stroke version of this. Now, we talked a lot about the Chinese invasion as far as it comes to motorcycles. Let me explain something to you about these Christinis. The 450, that's an SSR 450 Chinese motorcycle. They figured out that the Lonsin factory that was making the CRF 450Xs for Honda would also sell to them. It was a cheaper way for them to just basically make the bike themselves. So this is a SSR 450 two-wheel drive. The two-stroke is the same frame, and it actually has the gas or now Raiju 300 two-stroke engine on it. They sell these actually street legal. You can dual sport these from the factory.
You mean to tell me that I could put supermoto tires on that thing and do a two-wheel peel?
Yeah, you could.
Wow.
I'd like to see that one.
One cool thing too that people don't realize is they sell these to the special forces as well. The United States military uses the two-wheel drive four-strokes for different operations. So, that might be a feather in the cap of the Chinese motorcycles that the U.S. military uses them. But like we were talking on before, especially with you being retired military, Tom, just because it says it's military grade doesn't mean it's any good, right?
That's exactly right.
It was produced by the lowest bidder to meet the minimum spec.
I've seen stuff in the military I wouldn't depend on for nothing.
I guarantee.
Yeah. Ask guys that did time what they think of a Humvee in terms, especially the guys that had to work on them. I'm not a big electric bike fan. I think that's been established on the show. I understand what they're going for, but at the end of the day, especially being, an engineer by trade, mechanically minded, just nothing does it for me quite like a combustion engine. But something that does interest me about electric bikes is it's a lot easier to just have a hub drive set up on the front, so you could have a two-wheel drive.
Well, it's funny you say that. Christini actually offers a fully electric ATV now that's four-wheel drive that way.
I've seen that advertised.
Yeah, the guy was doing like reverse donuts and stuff because it was all independent drive. That's pretty interesting. Man. All right, let's move on to the last but not least weird innovation: reverse or upside down engines. What are we talking about there? Well, we kind of showed you one here to start with the oddball CZ.
I was going to say, funny enough, Frantisek was kind of one of the pioneers of really oddball engine layouts. James can start talking about Husaberg being kind of the one that grabbed a hold of that concept and started putting it on production bikes.
There's a cutaway of the Husaberg. I believe this is the 390 Husaberg, which is basically 400cc engine.
Yep.
It's a KTM on its side, upside down.
They went defunct like 2011, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that was right at the same time when. Well, actually, I think it was 2014, because KTM bought the redhead Italian Huskies that were manufactured by BMW. Revived the Husqvarna name as the Husaberg. So, a little bit of badge engineering that went away, but the Husabergs were really cool, interesting, and in my opinion, great bikes. I know a friend of the program, Jared Bolton, has a 570 that absolutely rips. I love riding that thing.
Guys absolutely love those things. The guys that own them are fanatics about them.
You were talking before the show too about Jack Balbo had one.
Yeah, he had. It was a bigger one than the 500. I forget what it was.
Probably 570. I think it's the
But
biggest one.
he said the thing was a hoot to ride, but it just self-destructed. It's just going across the field every time the spark plug would fire, it turned up a piece of dirt.
So much torque.
It has so much torque.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think in the end, the cost of manufacturer didn't outweigh the benefits of having the low center of gravity and the different rotational mass properties. It was close enough, but just different enough where some of the parts wouldn't interchange between the KTM and the Husaberg stuff. So,
have either one of you guys ever rode ATK?
I have. My friend Bobby Williams, one of my best friends growing up through high school and everything, had an ATK. Oh, I want to say it was like a 280. It was a Rotax
280 and a 340.
Yeah, he had a 280. I think it was the Rotax 2-stroke. It was a great ride bike.
I rode a friend of mine too, and I loved it.
Yeah,
but they just couldn't get the electrical problem.
That was out. That was a bike conceptually that was just ahead of its time.
Yeah, you could take the left engine cover off and the right engine cover, take the clutch nut off, pull the whole transmission out while I was in the bike.
Yep. Yeah, that's thinking
cool.
about mechanic guys that need to work on their stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
We've talked about it before on our wish list of top bikes was somebody to bring back the ATK brand. I think America's ready for that. I think there would be enough market to it.
Brought back. We started talking about Husaberg, and KTM owns the rights to Husaberg. So I guess something that's going to keep me up at night is the possibility of that being revived as their flagship electric brand.
Yeah, that might be a possibility.
It's kind of a big spit in the face to a company who's done so much in combustion engine development. But that's something that I think about in general as, combustion engine bikes aren't dead by any means, but I'm starting to worry that we're going to see less and less development. And in terms of internal combustion engines, and it's just going to be companies starting to go all electric.
Yeah, I think that's the next final frontier for motorcycles, in my opinion. We have got technology to such a point now where bikes are just such a surgical instrument for whatever discipline you want that there's only so many ways to skin a cat. And I think we've kind of got to that point where there's not really a good way to do it anymore.
Especially
I
with
had that
two-strokes.
argument with a friend of mine. He goes, "Well, they're going to get better and better." I said, "Man, I don't see how they can get any better. It has to be something really, really big and really high tech and really expensive to get any better."
I wonder what the next development in bikes would be, because it seems that we've went several years without any major actual innovations.
Yeah, there's so many different options for whatever you want to do anymore. It's hard to do.
We had the reed valve stage.
Yep.
Then we had the single shock stage.
Yep. Power valve, two strokes.
Yeah, then we had the power valve. And what else can you do?
Yeah, not much in two strokes.
And at some point,
suspension advantages now. Like we've got the best stuff you could ever want to ride on.
It's hilarious. Guys will get, for instance, like a KLX or something like that, complain about the suspension. Meanwhile, guys are running the Jack Pine 100 would have killed somebody. Pro level riders that would have killed somebody to have
crippled pro level riders now.
Yeah, 8 inches of stroke or something like that. So
wish I had 8 inches of stroke.
I bet you do. You let me know what his name is.
Yeah,
But-
but like, you know, that's why, you know, we've talked to everybody, you know, Tom McKee and a lot of the older guys, how it would have been exciting for us to grow up during that time where there was so much innovation coming out. It was like every year there was something new and exciting to try, and we kind of lost that luster these days. I feel.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, it was, down in the barnyard, we was always experimenting with something, you know, switching out carburetors or moving your silencer forward or backward, cut the stinger off, making it shorter or longer, just putting a different kind of head gasket in there,
Yeah.
different base gasket, and just grinding on the ports. Sometimes that didn't work out too well.
Yeah,
good times,
we've kind of passed the era of innovation where a bunch of manufacturers just having like groundbreaking improvements, for a several year run or whatever, and really just been more of the same. I mean, what new is there to be offered in terms of four strokes? What has changed
Yeah.
for a four stroke engine for decades at this point?
Yeah,
I mean,
almost 20 years.
Yeah,
It's
they've
just
pretty
rapid
much
changes.
yeah, since the old YZ400 came out. Yeah, things have gotten better with, valve clearances, tolerances on things, and obviously fuel injection.
Yep.
But
Metallurgy improved significantly right up until KTM released the 2025, I think, 500s, where now there's an article saying, "Oh no, these pits in the castings are merely cosmetic. Don't worry about all the pits and voids throughout the rest of it."
what's that cylinder say on the side of it?
Kimco? What's a Kimco?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think in the near future, KTM's going to have to come to terms with the fact where prospective KTM owners will have to come to terms with the fact that it's going to be a Chinese produced bike and an Austrian produced price tag, and they will do everything they can to hold on to that image of like Austrian production quality, like grim death, because that's what they're going to float on.
It's not just them though. Look at how many
Oh no, it's not
Japanese
just
things
them.
are made in Taiwan.
Yep.
I mean, it's just
Yep.
it's the nature
I
of the beast these days.
I can't fault my Kawasaki whatsoever, and it was produced in Taiwan. The
Yeah.
CRF 250, which is one of the most reliable
Malaysia.
dual sport bikes, Malaysia, partially in Taiwan. Just is what
It's
it
just how
is.
it is.
But I've got a lot warmer feelings to say Malaysia or Taiwan than I do China, for instance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you don't have the guy sitting there in his flip flops with the homemade sand cast
It
making your case.
it didn't take suicide nets around the factory to produce my Kawasaki.
Oh gosh.
When I bought my KLX, the first thing I did before I even bought it was go and look at the serial number and make sure it started with J.
Yeah. So made in Japan. All right, Tom. Anything else you can think of? Oddball, weird,
Tom,
in your days?
what do you think was the single biggest improvement to like enduro style bikes?
It's got to be the suspension because the motors didn't really, I mean, they changed on the outside. Or, I mean, let me give you an example. When I bought my 76 RM 250, I was proud of that thing. It's supposed to be the fastest dirt bike, going. So the weekend after I bought it, I went over to a friend's house, and he had a TS 250 with a hot bike kit in it. Now, this is a 350-pound motorcycle. And his buddy had a TM 250, which was a year before my RM. So we get down on old 250, and they said, "Let's just race them." I said, "I'll blow you guys away." No, I didn't. Nope, the RM wasn't any faster than the old 74 TS or the 71 TM. So, to me, the motors really didn't change that much. I think if you pulled an old CR 250 out of the dirt, the old gray ones, the 76, 77, and raced it against the new modern two-stroke, I think it'd be a hell of a race.
Sometimes I wonder about taking like a Yamaha DT 400 engine or something like that, putting in a modern frame with modern suspension. Of course, there's a guy that races local hare scrambles with a Husqvarna chassis that has a CR 500 motor in it, of all things, and does pretty well with it.
Yep.
And
I like hybrid bikes like that.
I like anything weird and off the wall, because the further down the rabbit hole we get, nobody does stuff like that hardly anymore. Nobody experiments like you're talking about, guys throwing hop-up kits on this bike, that bike, tuning carburetors, etc. That's not really a thing anymore. do you ever miss like the simplicity of bikes back then, where it was
Oh,
just like
yeah.
a magneto, gas
Oh,
tank
yeah.
carburetor, and a motor?
Yeah, yeah. It was, back then we take like an old TS 250.
Yeah.
Take my buddy's cellar, which is like 5x4, and there'd be 4 of us in there with that motorcycle. And we'd have that motorcycle engine out of the frame in about 15 minutes, have the cases split and fixing it in another 15 minutes, and another half hour after that, it's back together and going back in the frame.
What really opened my eyes to simplicity of old
No
bikes.
special tools required.
Yep. What really opened my eyes to simplicity of old bikes, I got a hold of a 72 Honda Trail 90 just to mess around with, and my fiance wanted to learn how to work on stuff, and I thought that was a good option. It was like, man, it really just got me interested in like old school carbureted like 2-stroke enduro bike or something like that. And, it's a good departure from the complexity of some of these modern bikes.
Remember the guys that had the XL 175 Honda and the DT1 that rode across wherever it was they went across?
Yeah.
Well, the guy that did my powder coat has a DT1.
Oh, heck yeah.
And he wants to sell it.
Ah,
And he's supposed to be getting me some pictures. He says it's all
There you
there
go.
except for one turn signal.
that'd be awesome.
So,
I'm sure I could break the other one off.
He don't value it as what it is. He values it as just an old motorcycle.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that he comes back with me with the price, and if it's reasonable, I'll buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, overall, I think that I think that time has come and passed of people trying weird stuff to better the sport or just thinking outside the box.
It's not enthusiast driven anymore.
Yeah. It's price driven.
It's price and profit. It's price and profit driven. The closest thing we got to an enthusiast driven motorcycle company in quite some time was, of all things, Cove.
I would agree with that.
For a short period of time before their CEO stepped down. I can say, regardless of my feelings towards that company as a whole, that guy genuinely was an enthusiast of the sport.
Yeah, I think you could say the same thing of ATK back in the day as well.
Just ATK is just ahead of its time.
Yeah, and look at we're speaking of innovation and stuff as well. The old Cannondales.
Yep.
Yeah.
So everybody was like, "What in the hell is this thing?" When it comes out, you had a reverse cylinder head, fuel injection, aluminum frame. People thought it was. I mean, let's be honest, it was kind of crap, but those ideas and those innovations are streamlined. Look at a Yamaha 450. What I just described is exactly what that bike is.
Well, people wasn't interested in Cannondale because Cannondale was big on bicycles back then.
Yep.
And everybody said, "Well, you can't build a motorcycle. You build a bicycle."
Well, Buell had the Griffin project that it was going to utilize the frame as a fuel tank.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of crazy stuff tried over the years. They say there's nothing new under the sun. It goes for bikes. It goes for 4x4s too. Back in the day, Toyota brought out the FJ Cruiser. Stupid name. Don't like the way it looks necessarily, but it was a really solid vehicle. Independent front suspension, solid rear axle, factory locker, if you wanted to blah, blah, blah. And, sales started declining. And then Ford comes out with a new Bronco. Yeah. And everybody just, jumps up and cheers. What is it? Solid rear axle, independent front suspension, factory locker if you want it. It's effectively the same. Well, it's just that some stuff comes out just a little bit. It's just not quite the right time.
Yeah.
And ATK, I think, definitely was a company that came about at the wrong time in history.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if they were out today as a new company, I think that, we talked about before, of all the choices that you have out, I think Americans these days would be proud if there was an American motorcycle company that was legitimate. I think that they would sell
all American motorcycles.
Yeah, I think it would sell well.
If ATK came back, I'd be putting in an application and planning to move.
Yeah.
That'd be an exciting job, but
all right,
I don't think it's going to come to pass.
Probably not. So that's pretty much it for all the innovation stuff. So let's get into. Had a couple comments here. Old Doug Wall said, "Wow." Well, thanks, Doug. Wow to you as well. Think you got glad you guys got to come and ride with us there. We guys just got another one popped up here, Mr. Mark Niggemeyer. But the Australians sure knew how to ride an ATK. Let's go on to some industry news, shall we? YouTube star Itchy Boots had her season 7 actually come to an unfortunate end. She was currently riding around in Australia, in Africa. She was coming up the western coast of Africa. Had a pretty bad crash, broke her collarbone. When she got flighted out of where she was at and to an African hospital, they transferred her back to her home in Denmark, and they found out she punctured a lung as well.
Huh.
So she's pretty much done for the year here now.
When
She does
I-
have a new book coming out though, kind of catalyzing all of her trips and stuff.
That's
So
A
unfortunate.
new book. I never knew she had a book come out.
She's
to start
had
with.
several, several crashes and stuff over her career. I know when I tore my shoulder to pieces in Brandywine, I had to ride out. There was
You
no
weren't gonna life flight out of
helicopter.
that.
No, you weren't going to life flight out of that mess.
Yeah,
but
when I messed my shoulder up Fort Hood, I had to ride 15 miles to get back to the house.
Fred,
Then I
Fred's,
got drunk and went to
Yeah.
the lake.
Fred's GPS kept trying to take us back onto the trails. It took us like an hour and a half to
Oh,
get
Lord.
back to camp, so I could get my arm all wrapped up so I could leave.
Fred, climb a tree, see where we're at.
Yep. He'll be out there sending smoke signals.
You guys are, looking for something to watch and kill some time, I highly recommend Itchy Boots' stuff. She's been all around the world, and if you want to live vicariously through that sense of adventure through somebody, I couldn't think of a better place to watch
I've
that.
watched her for 2 years, I think.
If
Yeah.
we're plugging YouTube channels that are extremely exciting in terms of world travel, I'd like to recommend Ed March of C90 Adventures.
Oh, man.
Absolute craziest human being on the planet on 2 wheels,
Now,
taking a Honda
guy
C90
Has some adventure.
all over the place. It
Lots of-
is-
lots
it is
of good
amazing.
guys.
I like where he where he took it all apart, put it in a bag, and
Yep.
put it in the boat.
Put it in a boat and took it. Yep. Told him it was camera equipment, so he didn't have to pay duty
Yeah.
taxes on a motorcycle.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, let's go to the next piece of industry news here. A little bit of sad, unfortunate news, but the founder of Han Wheels has passed away. I'm going to butcher this as well. R.E. Den Han passed away. He was born in 1950. One of the leading suppliers of aftermarket wheels anywhere in the world. They've had multiple people use their stuff. They've racked up 35 different world championships across multiple disciplines. So thoughts and prayers go out to the Han family.
Yeah,
I was
that's it.
actually sponsored by them for about a year and a half. Used their stuff. Great products, great service.
That's the end of an era.
Yeah. It was really weird too because I think a few months back we had some industry news on Woody from Woody's Wheel Works
Yes.
passed away.
Yes.
So sad to see these pioneer guys in their field
Well,
kind of go by the wayside.
Young guys like you and me are going to have to learn how to build true wheels.
Well, I'm gonna
so
ask
we
this
can-
guy because you just did a set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look pretty good. Last in the news, Sudco Racing USA is closing its stores. Known for a vast selection of carburetor parts, advice, and carburetors themselves, they will cease operations come June 6th. Kind of with the advent of fuel injection, it's going by the wayside. Sales are way down. But
It's a shame.
I think pretty much anybody back in the day that was working on carburetors knows the Sudco name.
Yep.
So it's sad to see a company that, especially here in the United States, been around for 60 years, have to shut its doors. So innovation
Well-
brings about change and closure, I guess.
Change isn't always good, but it's inevitable.
Back up just a little bit. Have you guys ever seen the Acron wheels?
The what wheels?
Acron.
Acron.
AKRMNT. Acron.
No.
Can't say I have.
I had one on the back of my YZ that I found somebody gave me. They're really weird looking. They're heavy, and if you break one of them, you're going to be laying in the hospital telling somebody how you broke it.
I know.
They're weird, really weird shape to them. The sides come up, and they dip down into mud catchers.
Huh.
They dip down in, and then the spoke channel went around.
I know my 03 KX250 that I had some weird wheels on it. It was like a completely smooth
Yeah, mine was
shape.
too.
They were really strong and tough.
That
though.
was my bike.
Yeah, I think Mom bought it off you, and I got it off her actually.
Well, it reminds me of something. My dad and I were out trout fishing somewhat close to where the Blackwater 100 happened. Way back in a holler, real hard to get to, hard walking, and found a hub and wheel assembly. I don't know what it's from. It's from an older bike.
That's Honda.
Looks like it.
Yeah, that's Honda.
But I looked at that and wondered if that bounced off the back of somebody's truck, either going towards or coming back from the Blackwater 100, since it was so close to the area.
Probably somebody got stuck out there in them bogs, and that's the only piece they could get, and they got about halfway out there. They ain't taking that either.
Can you imagine, 100, 200, maybe even 1,000 years from now, archaeologists in that area digging up parts, like trying to figure out what the hell this is? Well, look at this weird shaped lever. I wonder what the natives use this for. That's a clutch lever off a Husqvarna.
No sweat, we'll have nuked ourselves into oblivion long before that could ever happen.
Rumor has it there is 50 or 60 motorcycles out in bogs.
I believe it.
I
100%.
believe it. I know there's a bog hole in Boone County with a Jeep CJ7 in it.
We saw 2 Jeep Cherokees in Fort Hill where we were riding that had been set on fire on the right away.
Me and Fred, when we were through there not too long ago, saw a lot of burned out cars pushed over the hill and everything else too.
It's a great spot to get rid of some evidence.
Did you guys see the Jeep CJ5 on Hell's Hollow on the power line right away?
Oh yeah, it's still there.
Yep,
it's still there. Jeep disposal ground. We got a couple more comments, then we'll get to had to lay her down. Mr. Greg Blakey, hey buddy, glad you got to come and ride with us. You did a fantastic job. Were there any early attempts at motorcycle airbags? I'm sure there were. I know Fortnite did a video.
I think there's been a lot of female riders over the years.
Goldwing did for 2 years.
Yep.
Nobody bought it. Nobody liked it.
Yeah, I know.
Now they got the airbag vest.
Yeah, so. Fortnite did a video on that.
Alpine Stars has that airbag vest.
Yeah,
whatnot now.
It says it helps.
Yeah.
Interesting to see. Let's see. Mark Nigmer again. Blackwater, late 80s, and he wore a kangaroo backpack. That was the guy right in the ATK was talking about. Ed March took Mini Jeep to Alaska or something. Yeah, that little like Coleman.
Yeah, he was doing.
Jeeps.
It wasn't Alaska. It was Moab. He was doing like a Moab tour, and that thing just it is what it is. It's a 125cc Lafon Chinese motor trying to haul a dude in a
125-degree weather.
Yep.
Charlie Ho, what's going on, man? He said, I've seen Tom whip out a set of spoke wheels pretty dang quick. Charlie Chips, I'm sure you know. Yep, he's a good dude. All right, let's get into the very last part of the program, and that's one of everybody's favorites, Had to Lay Her Down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to lay her down.
All right, tonight's Had to Lay Her Down. We got a couple of them here since we're kind of in the very swing and heart of the hard enduro series going around in the different parts of the country and the world. Figured we'd show some hard enduro Had to Lay Her Downs. This first one here I like to affectionately call the corner pocket. Scorpion into the hole.
I'd be holding my back too after
Whiskey throw. Yeah, that's not going to go good. Oh.
I've done that several times. Yep, done that. I hope insurance ain't good enough to try that.
Bad when the bike was fine, but he's not.
I thought he made it.
Yeah, he did. He just rolled off the hills.
Yep, done that.
Give him Moab.
You know, getting off your bike on some of this stuff's funny. You go from being on your bike looking at the scenery to being in the scenery looking at your bike.
I remember the first time when I had the GoPro, was racing down Elk somewhere, and I crashed. And I didn't think much of it. I got back to the house and I was playing the GoPro back, and all of a sudden it's like sky, ground, sky, ground, sky, ground.
Cartwheel.
Yeah. Dude, I don't remember all that.
You might be slightly concussed.
Yeah, I was sore in the morning.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, Tom, thanks so much for coming in and hanging out with us tonight. We really appreciate that, dude. It's been a pleasure.
It was fun.
Love having you in the studio, and we'll have to do it again here sometime soon.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, we could do an episode on, Blackwater, kind of
Oh, I got to tell you some stories.
the
about
life and times of Tom King. We'd all be very interested to learn more about.
Be a whole episode, I'm sure.
Yep.
If you guys are looking to get out in our area as a new rider and check some stuff out, make sure you hit up Tom King. Tom's
Yeah.
Tom's such a good dude for
Just get on,
shepherding people, and
get on Facebook and holler at me.
we'll leave it at that, and we'll see you guys next week for episode 59 of Tallboys and Trackmasters. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks again, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you guys.